So you started. Now what? Now what? Now what? Hi. Welcome back to Drama 203, lecture number 5. So you've started, which for some is easy, for others is the big thing, the big hurdle. But once you start, you have to keep going. You have to continue developing. You have to figure out where this is all going. And as mentioned previously, you have to finish. Right? Creativity is not just about starting a bunch of different things. Creativity is about the follow through as well. And there's creative ways to get there. The main one that kind of keeps coming back, depending on who you talk to or what you read, is this idea of daydreaming. Just wandering, letting your thoughts go where they might. Now, this can also be seen negatively. We'll touch on that in a bit, just as far as, a lack of focus or, kind of flaky, and that persistent description of artists as aloof and, head in the clouds kind of thing. But there is science to back this up. Now, a lot of artists over the years, a lot of writers especially, have, proclaimed that this is part of their creative process. It's one thing to work, it's one thing to sit and focus and create material, but then you can get lost. And so a lot of these famous writers, I'll name a few in a bit, maybe I'll put them here, they went for walks. And I've kind of touched on this before, but this is an important thing to kind of open up. It's not, the walk is, you might have your own version of a walk, but it's this idea of just not hyper-focusing in that moment, not forcing something, and allowing your mind to drift a little bit. So you go for a walk, and whether that's, maybe there's a little exercise in that for you, or maybe that's just communing with nature, or maybe that's just getting out of the house and clearing your mind. A lot of these artists through time really bring that to the point where some of them would do this at the same time every single day. It was part of the process. It was part of their creative process. It was one thing to write, which was very important, but then 11 a.m., we're going for a walk. Maybe they go through town. Maybe they go grab a cup of coffee somewhere and kind of meander their way back. It's a way of loosening that hyper focus. And I'm going to read a section. Again, we're going back to Wired to Create. That for many of us experience that our best ideas seemingly come out of the blue, when our minds are off wandering elsewhere. Idle though it may seem, the act of mind wandering is often anything but mindless. So you can call it daydreaming, you can call it mind wandering, you can call it idea incubation. Why not? Right? It's letting things marinate, letting things exist. And this also requires, and this is key to this process, is a touch of slowing down. Again, the creative process does not go in a straight line, start, finish. It meanders. It goes other places. It needs to go backwards, forwards, up and down. It needs to kind of figure its way towards where it's going. So if you're just starting and finishing, great. Maybe you're wonderful and you've created something great. But you could probably make something a little better, or something a little bit more interesting, or something that might kind of take you on a different path and open up new worlds for you. So it's this idea of allowing the ideas and the work to wander, to meander, to change perspectives, to let go a little bit. There's another section here that I want to touch on and read. The sudden lifting of the burden of anxiety and fear which presses upon our daily life so steadily that we are unaware of it. What happens is something negative. Hold it. That is not to say inspiration, as we commonly think of it, but the breaking down of strong habitual barriers. There's a lot to unpack in that. So when they're saying it's something negative, we're talking about, let's say, dismantling the hardcore routines of daily life. And again, as I've said multiple times, everyone's got a different life, everyone's got different responsibilities. So this isn't, again, one size fits all, not a thing. But it's allowing time in the process, allowing the mind to wander, lets go of the need to finish, the need to come up with the great idea. And that can turn, that need to do these things can create anxiety, fear, can create stressors, to the point where, one, we're probably making quick decisions just to try and get it done, knowing that in some instances, just getting it done is the thing. But if we're talking about creativity, that's what the class is for, it's a lot of times either we just get it done and we're never happy with it, as I mentioned kind of with my painting last week, or the stress, the anxiety, and the fear gets so great that we stop. We throw up our hands, say, oh, I can't make it what I want it to be. I'll never, I can't come up with the right idea. It's never going to be good enough. The troll talking. So we let go and we just stop. And reading a lot of those troll descriptions, there was, for many of you, this idea of a mountain of unfinished things. In and of themselves, not a bad thing, but if none of them get finished, now we're stuck, right? Unfinished things are everywhere, but returning to them, finishing a few things, getting what needs to be finished, what do you want to finish, these are all different things. So this idea of, okay, so we're getting stressed, we're getting, the anxiety is building. And I know for a lot of us, it is, we have to perform, we have to get good grades, we have to do well at work, all these things. Sure. But that stress can create these negative outcomes where we forget things or we make mistakes because we're not, clearly thinking, or we're not eating well, or we're not sleeping well enough, and they can build and build and build. So the idea of the negative that's talked about in that quote is this idea of breaking down some of those strict forms and guidelines and rules and all these things, just opening them up. So it's not about necessarily being inspired, but it's about opening up some of those old rigid paths. And once we start opening those things up, things can happen. Ideas can arrive, new ideas, new ways of looking at things, new perspectives can show up. But if we're holding on, right, this idea of pre-creation and only holding on to that first idea, if we're forcing that, we're making odd choices, for lack of a better word. There's another section in here, and I love this because I can talk and it's theoretical, and yes, I've gone through the experience. I've made a lot of work, and I've created my own processes and my own ways of thinking about this. I wrote the book about it. That's great, and for some, that's wonderful. But sometimes, that hardcore research, right? It's one thing for an artist to talk about finishing and creativity and daydreaming and all this, and thinking that, oh, it's just kind of theory and it's art talk. But it's not just art talk. This isn't just about the arts. This is about every field. This idea of kind of letting go a little bit. There's a section in here where they talk about this idea that many artists do this, but many professionals do this as well. So there's one thing about taking a walk. Sure, great, commune with nature if that's your thing. Other people take showers. You heard that correctly. Other people take showers. This idea of taking a shower, letting the water hit you, cleaning yourself, creates ideas. And how many of you have had ideas in the shower or remembered things while you were taking a shower? So they did this huge research thing, and I think it was Harvard related as well. And the research found that 72% of people around the globe reported experiencing new ideas in the shower. In fact, people reported that they are more likely to get fresh insights in the shower than at work. Now, why do you think that is? And I think there's a simple way to talk about it. I don't want to get into the neurological stuff, but it's when you take a shower, this is an odd way to kind of go about this direction. So when you are in the shower and cleaning yourself, it is something you have done thousands of times. And so you got a system, you got a routine. You start with the arm and you move down, you go up, then you do the hair, not me, but other people. And so it's a thing that you are doing almost unconsciously. And that's why the walking is similar, right? You know how to walk and you're just kind of meandering. So it's not something you need to really hyper focus on. You just go in the shower and then routine takes over and you do what you need to do. Because part of your brain is just occupied doing the function that it needs to do, that other side is free now to imagine. That other bits of your brain are now free to wander and dream because they don't need to be fully focused on the thing, that the task at hand. Now, I mentioned the driving last class. You should focus a little more when you're driving, but also there is a kind of innate comfortableness that comes from that, right? You get into a flow and you understand how things work and shifting and turning and all those things. There's a bit of unconsciousness to that. So it's the same thing, whether it's showering, walking, all these things. Part of your brain knows what to do, so it's just going to do what it needs to do. And that frees up extra space. That frees up this, loosens the tight focus on, I need to find solutions, I need to find solutions. It's the same thing in a sense with, dreaming at night, right? When that kind of the main focus of interacting with the world, that can shut down because it's no longer necessary. And then your subconscious goes to town. And that's where your dreams come from. And there's usually some relation to things that happened to your day or stuff that happened 15 years ago. Who knows what's going to get triggered back there. But that's the whole thing, is that the main purpose of surviving the world can take a break, and then the rest of it takes off. It's the same concept. Once you start, this is where you need to go now. You need to work, you need to create, but take some time, right? Step away from it, put it away for a while. It's not always possible, but if you have the opportunity, even if it's just half a day or a half hour, just stop doing what you're doing and then, go make something to eat or clean something. I talked about procrastination last week. It's the same thing. You're distracting your kind of hyper-focused mind and tricking it a bit to allow other thoughts to arrive. And I think this is a very important part of the process. And so when you are now, let's say, many of you might be finished your video. Well, it's not due yet. So can you look at it again? Is it finished, in quotes? Is there more that could happen? There's time. Right? If you're in the process of putting it together for the due date, can you take a moment and look at it differently, or stop hyper-focusing and then, go for that walk right after you've worked on it? This is the key thing too. It's not just randomly doing things, but it's kind of, you're interrupting the workflow to now distract yourself with something. So it's still alive, it's still in there, it's still working. And I've done this in my own professional life when I've created work where I wanted to, in the script that I wrote, this thing arrived and I called it a light grenade. I had no idea what it was. I just wanted something where light exploded from. And for weeks, I was talking with the designer I was working with. I was trying to imagine things. I was surfing online for items or something that could represent this thing. We went through a few different possibilities. And then I think I was just standing out on the patio, or I was doing something. I wasn't thinking directly about this thing. And this was a couple of weeks later. And the idea came to me, or an idea came to me, where we could create a box with a lot of reflecting material on the inside with small holes and a very powerful light. And, see if that worked, or, using the idea of the disco ball, right? I'll put one here. The disco ball, with all its light reflecting. And could we then maybe put one of those into a box and then shine light in it? And so we found a solution around that. It wasn't exactly what I thought of in that moment, but for, 2 weeks, I was struggling, searching, racking my brain to try and find the solution to this light grenade idea I had. And it was only when I kind of let go a little bit and was doing something else that the idea arrived. And I've held on to that knowing that, and this is kind of a bit of a lesson, knowing that ideas will arrive. And I talk about this even with the writing class that I'm teaching too, is that sometimes the story direction will reveal itself. Characters and their wants and desires will reveal themselves if you work, if you're in the doing and taking breaks. But it's a lesson to know that if you take a step back and you find a distraction or go for a walk or something, you're not abandoning the project. You are not working, right? This isn't laziness that's happening here. And once you kind of succeed, in quotes, a couple of times of getting these ideas while letting go, there's an understanding, and I've tried to incorporate this. It's a process. It's a practice you have to keep returning to. But the idea was, if I can't come up with something, or if I'm not coming up with a particular solution, I will not panic. I will pause. I will put it over here, and it's an active thing that needs to get looked at, but I'm not worried about it yet. Now, as you get closer to, let's say, a performance date, or you're entering the theater space for rehearsals, well, maybe something needs to show up. But even if it's just a temporary idea or a temporary measure to, it's not the thing that's going to be there, but we need something to happen in this moment. If you trust the process, and this takes time and experience, I understand that, but if you can trust the process, then the ideas will arrive. And the stress and that fear, while it's always going to be there nagging a little bit, you can let go of some of it because it's unnecessary. If you just stay focused and distracted, keep working on it without putting too much pressure on it, ideas will arrive. And whether it's the right idea or the final idea, doesn't matter. That idea will either spawn new ones or morph into what it needs to be, but it will arrive. It takes trust within that process, and that's not always the easiest thing to allow ourselves. But the more this happens, the more you need to be aware of it and understand it and take note, so that you can, in that moment, it's like, oh, I don't have an answer for this. You can then just say, it'll show up at some point, and keep working on other things. And while you're working on other things, that's now in your subconscious and it's doing what it needs to do. Now, there is a darker side to this as well, and I'm only going to touch on it briefly. But this idea of daydreaming and mind wandering, it has a purpose, but it can also get a little away from us too. If we spend too much time daydreaming, too much time mind wandering, well, then we can start maybe overthinking things, or following, down the rabbit hole, some negative thoughts, and that can escalate and escalate and escalate. And you can there are certain artists over time. I think T.S. Eliot was one who mentioned that, like a lot of artists that were sick when they were young and were bedridden and were stuck, isolated for a long period of time. Well, that was helpful for them and their creativity. But you could argue that there were thousands of probably other kids who were bedridden and it didn't help their creativity. So it's easy to pick and choose these little anecdotes to make sense of things. But there is truth to it, but it's not everything. So the same thing with, let's say, negative thoughts or darkness, or a little bit of madness, and that some artists kind of cling to as their North Star of, well, that's the root of my creativity and my output artistically is because of my madness or whatever. Sure, it's an element, but I don't think it's everything. But we can romanticize these things, and it's great for selling books. It's great for making movies. It's great for legacies and myths about certain artists. Sure, but there's again, like in the long game, if we can connect these two things, there are the regular times when these people just had to go about their business, and it wasn't the madness that was causing all the work. They were just doing work, and then it's over time these things get layered in. But there's Edgar Allan Poe, very famous for his dark short stories and his poetry, and he's inspired I don't know how many different kind of thriller and horror movies. But he was a man who liked and ventured into those dark places, and it was something that interested him, and that's great. But then he kind of doubles down on the idea of madness and uses it for his own myth making. And so there's a quote in here by Edgar Allan Poe about daydreaming, right? Where I've colored it as a light thing, going for a walk or taking a shower or meandering. He gets a little specific with it. So he says, "Men have called me mad, but the expense is not settled, whether madness is or is not the loftiest intelligence, whether much that is glorious, whether all that is profound does not spring from disease of thought, from moods of mind exalted at the expense of the general intellect. They who dream by day are cognizant of many things which escape those who dream only by night. In their gray visions they obtain glimpses of eternity and thrill in waking to find that they have been upon the verge of a great secret." Deep. And sure, probably for him that made a lot of sense. And what can happen is we tend to try and justify resistance, but also justify what we're going through, right? So his output, his artistic energies, the way he thought about things, and the struggles maybe that he was going through with depression and other things, and this is a way for him to kind of legitimize all that. And it's true, sure, that seeing things or being in certain states, and I'm not going to encourage anybody to do any of these things, but sometimes they can open things up and provide different ways of looking at things, sure. But they can also do none of those things and just get you in trouble. So when we read those things, it's always important to not romanticize any of this, right? We're all individual. We all need to work and figure out how we operate and what our process is. We can be influenced, we can be inspired, absolutely, but don't buy in whole hog somebody else's philosophy. Another part of this whole thing, and this is a book called Playwrights Teach Playwriting. And this helped me out a lot when I was kind of starting out. I got this a few years ago. And there's a section in here where the woman that's writing this article, Maria Irene Fornes, talks about daydreaming. And she talks about it a little bit differently, where her idea of daydreaming is visualization. And I think that's very interesting because I've incorporated bits of this when I've needed or when I've been stuck, right, with a character. There are times where I wasn't sure where this character needed to go. So I this might sound weird. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I kind of created this person was in their bedroom and they were kind of about to start their day and they were heavy and they weren't sure where to go. So I kind of made a little scene for myself in my own room and put myself in that mindset. And I just sat there and I visualized that character's room. I visualized what was going on with the character at the time. And so it was about a lover that had left. So I visualized them as well. And I sat there for, I think, maybe 30 minutes. And I put on music that I thought would work within the scene. So I was kind of creating my own little movie out of the whole thing. And I was just visualizing. I was just trying to find new ways of seeing things or trying to really see things through a character's eyes. So there's one way of kind of playing around with that. I do something with the acting exercises where I will ask an actor who's doing a monologue or creating a certain character to stand with their eyes closed in a neutral stance and visualize that character that they are playing in front of them, 2 feet in front, very close. And so they would stand in front and they would visualize this person right in front of them. But they would go into detail. It's not enough to just, oh, they're about this tall and, they look like this. It was about detail. What, the shape of their nose, their ears, How did their hair fall? Did they make eye contact or not? Where was their breath? How did they breathe? Where might they've held their energy? And I can do this in a quick way where maybe it's like 15 minutes just as an introduction exercise, and then you can kind of take it and do what you need to do with it. If I was doing this in an acting class, we would spend maybe a half hour, 45 minutes in different ways along this idea, and we would revisit it, a couple of classes later to kind of reconnect. And this is what this playwright is talking about, is this idea of just visualizing, right? So it's one thing to intellectually come up with a bunch of ideas and logically work your way through a story, right? This happens, then this happens, and if this character does this, well, it's logic dictates that this character does this. That's great, and I think that's very important. But for the little details, you need to then kind of pause and visualize. And this gives your work a bit of uniqueness, because if you're just going logic to logic, well, then you might be doing something that somebody else has done, and maybe there's no life to it. There's no you within it. So can you pause? So let's say working on your troll video, you've written a description, and this is part of the exercise was to intellectually write a description of this creative troll. You're intellectually, logically breaking it down. Can you close your eyes? Can you visualize it? Can you see the details within it? Some of you describe kind of a mess of papers or a black shadow-like creature and all these things. And that's great, but now detail them. Right? And maybe it's not even possible to get within the video, but for your own imagination, don't just say, oh, it's a blob of this. Be specific with the things that it's made up of. Be specific with maybe the voice that they use. If it's kind of an amorphous, abstract kind of shape, well, try and be as specific as you can with what it's made of. How does it move? The flow. So you're taking again, it's this idea. It works with daydreaming. It's the same concept. You're taking a step back, and you are now allowing your imagination more than your intellect. You're taking your imagination now, a bit of subconscious in there, and you are just seeing the world that this being, this character exists in now. You could say, well, that's great for the art, so that's great for writing, that's great for an actor, but I don't do those things. It is great for everything. And you've heard this too with, visualizing or manifesting, which is, I don't want to get into that, but it's the same concept, right? If you're going into a job interview, you can visualize how you might be in that job interview. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know potentially who's interviewing you. You don't know what the room is going to look like, but you can visualize yourself in that space. And maybe that calms you down a little bit. If you have a project at work, or if it's just a shift you have to do, maybe you can visualize yourself through that process and just take a step back, because things can build up, stresses can build, anxiety can build up, and without releasing some of it, we're just making quick decisions that maybe aren't very creative and maybe not the right ones. So can you allow yourself within a creative process, moving forward past the class in whatever endeavors you're doing, whatever department you're in, whatever classes you're taking, can you allow yourself in moments to take a step back and take a look, visualize, mind wander, daydream, right? I cultivate or incubate ideas, idea incubation, this incubation period of just thinking about something or imagining, not less thinking, more imagining. Can you do that? And if you can incorporate that into a process, I believe, and it's kind of backed up by history and science, that it will expand the tools you have to work with and your creativity. Is it going to eliminate stress and anxiety? No, Those are constant things, but we can mediate them a little bit. We can usurp them and dodge them and say, okay, I'm getting a little tight. I've been really focused on this thing, so now I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to take a half hour. I'm going to take an hour. I'm just going to go and meander. Not to go anywhere. You might, maybe do some chores, maybe go get groceries, clean something, do whatever. But the idea is to kind of remove yourself from this direct connection to the thing and let the rest of your mind into the game. This next thing, be quick. This will be a shorter video, so because I want you to have some time to work on your videos. I read this a few times about people talking about being a jack of all trades, right? Because it's the first half of that quote is the thing that people use, right? Being a jack of all trades and a master of none, almost as a negative, right? If you know too much, if you dabble in too many things, well, you're not mastering that work. Well, there's a second part to that quote, which is, but oftentimes better than a master of one. So jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. I mentioned this before about this idea of genius and all this, of somebody being really good at one thing, but not very good at anything else. And if that's your world, if that's your existence, fantastic. But don't look at this idea of being a jack of all trades or trying so many different kind of things as a negative, that you'll never master anything. Do you need to? And that's why the second half of that quote is very important, because if we stop just halfway, jack of all trades, master of none, yeah, I'm never going to be a great master at anything. Well, that's subjective, first of all. And again, do you need to be? If you want to be, well, then hunker down and do what you need to do. But you can't use it as an excuse to not work on other things, right? Well, if I work on other things, I'm not working on the main thing, therefore I am wasting time. That's the biggest thing when we connect daydreaming and trying different things, this idea of wasting time. So, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. Right? If you can dabble in a bunch of things, well, maybe that's one more interesting, one more fulfilling, one provides you with more input into your creative endeavors, potentially. So I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. I'm saying you can't use one as a negative or as an insult in any kind of way, because there's that second part. So allow this to open up. And I mean, I talked about my painting last class, and I might have mentioned this before, but I started doing that because a play or a screenplay, a text, play text or a screenplay, that's years in a process. It is. So I have an idea for something, great. Now I begin researching, if it's a historical thing, or if it's just little bits of details that a world that I'm investigating. So I do a little research. So there's, either a month to 6 months time there. Then I start writing. And that's, sometimes the first draft comes out very quickly. Sometimes it takes a while. But that's just the first draft. There's multiple drafts that need to happen. So maybe at draft 2 or 3, I get a more official kind of reading together so I can really hear it. And then maybe there's 2 or 3 more drafts there. So there's another year of getting the script into a place it needs to get to. And then once that's done, now I'm start to pitch it to people. And to theater companies or to production companies or to directors or actors or whoever, I just start pitching. Well, that's not a direct line either, right? Because all these companies might have a backlog of 2-3 years of material, or it's not what they're into or not the things that they produce. So you have to be specific. You have to do research on the people that you're approaching. That process could take 6 months to 3 years maybe, or more, to get somebody to read it. That's just to read it. That's not to make it. That's just to read it. And then now, to find the money to produce it and all that kind of stuff, that's another 2-3 years. So if I have an idea for a script, we're talking possibly anywhere from 3 to 6 years till maybe something happens. That's a long time. And it's a long time to not know if something's good or if you're going in the right direction, or to get any kind of energy back, because the idea of finishing something is very exciting, and it does provide some energy, and there's a sense of accomplishment for you, instead of continuously working on something that never seems to be finished, and it can drain you. And in those moments too, you can kind of say, well, what's the point? So when I started painting, it was one, to be able to finish something. Right? I can throw up a canvas, I can start. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. I'm just creating. I'm just allowing impulse to guide me. And there's zero stakes in that world, because I'm not doing this to become famous. I'm not doing this to put on a show. I do it for my own enjoyment and for my own enjoyment. Let's stop there. Yeah, it brings me joy. I enjoy doing it, but there's another side to this too, where I get to express myself creatively. I get to make creative choices. I get to take risks that maybe I can't do in the script that I'm writing or the show I'm producing. Maybe I need to bring that in a little bit. So this other this other art form allows me to express myself and make mistakes and do all these things that we can get frustrated with or don't think we can do within our main focus. But it also allows me to finish something, and again, last week nothing's ever finished, but it allows the sense of accomplishment. Like I put something up, it was this just white emptiness, and then I filled it with color, and great, now I'm going to move on to the next one. While I'm still writing, I'm still doing all the other work, but this gives me that sense of accomplishment. So am I wasting time that I could be focused on the script that I'm writing by doing this other thing? Or am I fulfilling myself a little bit creatively to allow myself to then focus back on the script that I'm working on? I tend to focus on the latter, right? This gives me a creative output. It fills me with joy. So then I can then go, I love writing, don't get me wrong, but it can be a slog sometimes. So distractions, hobbies, all these things are very positive to the world of creativity. So do not distance yourself from your mind trying a bunch of things and thinking it's a negative. You're not wasting time. You're discovering, you're learning about yourself within these moments, and that is very important. You're probably doing better for yourself than if you only focused on a single thing. I'm going to wrap it up here. We'll keep it relatively short. As mentioned in D2L, I made a note there too that I don't normally provide feedback for every single submission because there's too many of you, and I would be doing this for days on end. And I have learned over time that not everyone reads it. So I'm not going to waste my time doing it. But if you do want some kind of feedback, send me an email, ask, and be specific about what you would like feedback on. Not, if it's just a general, what'd you think? Or what could I have done? Sure. Or if there are specific things that you tried that maybe you'd like some opinions on. Absolutely. But email me and ask. The other part of that is that, so this will go up on Tuesday, and you will have still 3 days to submit your video. So maybe when you watch this, you're done and you're ready to submit, and that's fine. Totally legit. But you have time between now and then. Give yourself the opportunity to go for a walk, whether metaphorically or real, take a shower, allow yourself to daydream a little bit and mind wander and see if something else shows up. Not something brand new, that could happen, but maybe a detail. Maybe there's something in there that you're not 100% happy with, but you feel you have to finish, or that, you're done, so that's it. Or an idea didn't really fully materialize and maybe you'd like to investigate it. So just give yourself that time, that break within the process, and see if there's something else you can do to it and for it. Allow the creative, it's about a creative troll. So the best way to fight it is to keep being creative. So just test it out. See if it works. Daydream. Allow yourself to go where it needs to go. All right, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much. Have a great week. I will see you. The final lecture video will be next week. And then the reflection paper. And then the final quiz. But this is moving fast. So thank you very much for sticking around, for submitting all the work. I really appreciate it. I hope you're getting inspiration and information from this. I hope it's been valuable to you. Keep being creative. Take care of yourself. I'll see you next week.